Today we'll be chatting with Gordon Kennedy, who is currently on tour playing guitar for Garth Brooks. Gordon's family moved to Nashville when he was just a baby at the age of 1. His mother and father were looking to pursue a career in music, and his father ultimately ended up being quite successful, inducted into the Musicians Hall of Fame, and played with musical acts such as Johnny Cash, Roy Orbison, and even Elvis Presley. Gordon now has written 15 songs for Garth Brooks, as well as songs for many other artists as well. But he saw his career take a big turn when he co-wrote Change the World that was ultimately performed by Eric Clapton. It's a crazy story how that came about. And so today, Gordon shares a little bit of music history, as well as the lessons that he's learned through making a living in the music industry.
Quite frankly, it's kind of unusual.
It's quite Franklin.
Got it. Quite Franklin.
Hey, I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to come on. I know that when we were working things out, you had a ton of stuff going on, and I was originally thinking about bringing you on. I thought, man, you must be busy with the Garth Brooks tour, but I was like, it's not just the Garth Brooks tour; it's everything that you have going on right now.
Yeah, he's an adventure, to say the least.
Yeah.
Back in fall of 2018, he called me up and asked me if I would do 3 years of stadium shows with him. And he said it would be about 10 cities. Mm-hmm. So the first year, 2019, we did 10 cities, 13 shows, because 3 of the cities we did doubles. And then, of course, we only were able to get 1 show in 2020 before everything shut down. 5 shows last year before everything got put on pause again. But in between these stadium shows, at some point, he decided we would go play dive bars.
Oh,
and
really?
He released a single in 2019, title of the song, a duet with Blake Shelton called Dive Bar. So we went and did, I think, 7 dive bars that year, where we would, drop into a club that has, 700 capacity. And
unannounced?
No, it would be announced. And what they would do was coordinate with the local radio station as far as people, the access to tickets to get in to see one of these things. So like in Chicago, the first one we did, it was 1,000 people standing, no seats, but standing in this club. And the people would go through the local radio stations to try to win tickets for that. So it wasn't even a charged admission. And for example, when we played Oklahoma City, which I think was the second to the last, we did 2 last year. Oklahoma City was one. 700 available tickets, and through the local radio station's website, people would go and try to win those 700 tickets. And I was told that 2.4 million people tried to be one of the 700 people.
Oh, wow. In Oklahoma City?
Yeah, in Oklahoma City, yeah.
You guys came through Cincinnati. What date were you in Cincinnati? It was recently.
Oh, been a few shows ago.
Yeah, I had a bunch of friends that went to that. I was out of town when you guys came through, and I had a bunch of friends that went to that event. And first of all, the stadium, the stage that you guys put up, was amazing. And I had, a few friends that recorded little clips of the show, and just overwhelmingly everybody that I know that went to that show said that it's one of the best concerts they've ever been to in their life. And I was like, really? Because Garth Brooks has been around for so long and I've seen a lot of acts that just, bands that were popular in the 80s and they're still doing concerts now. And I've never seen anybody fill a stadium. He filled the entire Paul Brown Stadium.
Yes. And we did Baton Rouge, maybe, I don't know, several weeks, 6 or 7 weeks ago now, possibly 104,000 people.
Wow.
Down in Baton Rouge Tiger Stadium. So he still is bringing the numbers big time. And yeah, that production for his show too is to me, when I look at it and I see the pictures from the drones, it looks like it just landed from some other planet or something.
Yeah.
Maybe the best way to describe it is Close Encounters of the Third Kind movie, where you're looking down and that thing lands. That's what it looks like. It looks like it just landed. And you'd have to go see, like years before, it would have to be a Pink Floyd or some show like that, where there would be a production that would be anything close to what he's doing.
I saw actually a shot of the stadium when the stadium was kind of blacked out and everybody had their cell phone lights on. And it looked like you guys were in outer space. Just, there were so many lights around the stadium.
The first time I was on stage when that happened, it was in St. Louis, March of 2019. So it was the first show. And when he does the River song, that's when everybody puts the phone light on. And I'm standing on stage in the middle of this dome with that around me. And you're right. It felt like I was doing a spacewalk. It's just kind of surreal.
Talk to me about, I'm just curious getting this perspective from a different type of artist, I guess, because I know what it's like to walk out to a sold out arena, but what is it like being on stage up there? Because I personally never, for example, fought in front of 65 or 70,000 people, or 82,000 people for that matter.
But you have one opponent trying to whip your tail.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
we walked out on stage in Baton Rouge, and the noise they made before we played the first note was deafening, right? Yeah. And he said after the first two songs, he looked at the crowd and said, okay, tonight it's us against you. And at the end of the night, he said, okay, you win. And they did. My brother played college football at Ole Miss years ago, and he told Garth before the show, he said, get ready to get your butt kicked tomorrow night. And Garth I think he thought about that for a few minutes, because the next day before the show, he wanted the band and crew in a meeting to tell us that this wasn't a show. It wasn't a concert. It was a heavyweight title fight. He said those words to us. And he said, you're going to be a part of history tonight. And by the time he made that little pep talk and we hit the stage, I think we were about a foot above where we would normally be going out to do one of these shows, which is already the adrenaline pumping, and you just feel the energy and the electricity. So we knew that particular one was something special, and he gave us a little talk, but it sounded to me like he was getting ready to do what you would do,
yeah,
rather than what we would normally do.
Well, let me ask you this. You guys are coming off stage after a performance. How many hours are you actually out on stage?
I would say they go maybe an hour 45 to 2 hours.
Okay. So slightly longer than a fight,
Yeah, but it's something also, his shows, for some reason or other, they go by so quickly. I feel like we've been out there for about 30 to 45 minutes.
Yeah, I've had, sometimes when I'm competing, I've had rounds that feel like they were an hour 45 to 2 hours, and then other times the round just clicks over. I'm like, that felt like 30 seconds. So
yeah,
when you're coming off a stage and you guys hit the back rooms, how long does it take what's that adrenaline dump like? How long does that take? What is it like post show?
Well, we usually there's a tunnel that we'll enter off of the stage that will go down the aisle between the crowd so that nobody can reach out and grab us or throw something at us or whatever. It's just, that's the way we've always done it. He's always done it. And it'll be so loud in that tunnel that I keep my in-ear monitors in to protect my ears from the crowd noise. And usually what we do is, once we realize the show is over, because we're waiting down there sometimes to see if he wants us back up on stage. He's still up there by himself with a guitar by himself, performing a couple of songs. Maybe he'll do some sing-alongs with the crowd or something. And then when we get the word that it's over, the show is over, we run down the tunnels and jump into these vehicles to take us out of the stadium before everybody else gets released, and kind of get ahead of it so that we're not caught in traffic. And I think that, my brother Brian, who's he's a kind of a right-hand man for Garth as a songwriter, get him from point A to B when they're out on the road doing these shows. My brother will get there into whatever city we're playing a day before and learn maybe 4 or 5 different ways to leave the stadium with the vehicle that Garth will be in with him after the show. So they want to get out safely. Sometimes it's coordinated with the police. We have an escort. Baton Rouge was probably the greatest thing I'd ever seen as far as motorcycle policemen. About 8 of them, and it looked like the Joey Chitwood thrill show with these guys, jumping around, and this guy would pass and go up ahead and block that on ramp, and they were zooming past us, no telling how fast they were going, but they had it down. They've done that before. But yeah, the adrenaline is still going, even when you're watching these motorcycle, police officers doing their thing. It's like, what are we doing? What is going on right now? But it's just part of, the event that is one of his shows. And yeah, the getting out of the stadium is always kind of a mini event in itself.
Yeah, it would always, when I was in the stadium, it would always take us a while to get out of the stadium, because I'm there, I have like medical checks and everything else that's going on. Oh, yeah. And I mean, oftentimes I would end up being carted to the hospital or something to get stitching or whatever. But even still, with all that being said, typically I wouldn't leave the stadium until probably at least an hour after all the fans were gone. And there are always fans that are sticking around, and there has to be different ways out of the stadium. But it's interesting, for you and even probably Garth as well, experiencing that, particularly with him having kind of this quasi retirement period where he probably starts living this kind of semi-normal life within his daily routine. You know, like I would imagine that a guy like Garth can probably go to the grocery store, maybe.
I don't know these days.
Yeah, exactly.
Back in '99 when we did the Chris Gaines record, we would go with him to eat dinner somewhere or something, and usually the person at the table next to us would phone somebody. He's sitting right next to me, and of course we could hear them.
Yeah.
But the way Garth would handle that, and probably still does to this day, is he'll reach over and say, "Give me that phone," and start talking to him. He's not a keep distance from the people. He loves to engage with. Oh, he's the best. I've never seen anybody like him when it comes to staying accessible with his fans and making sure that everybody is noticed and appreciated.
Yeah, but to go from at least being able to eat in a restaurant in a certain city that post show having to be escorted with these police escorts that are blocking exits like a presidential convoy is it's crazy to see that juxtaposition.
Yeah, it might be more like that around the actual show itself. Yeah. But I think in just his day to day, he's still that guy that will see somebody on the road walking, carrying their groceries and give them a ride,
Yeah.
So many things he does behind the scenes people don't realize or will never see or read about or see. But he's just been that guy ever since I've known him. He's never changed. There
was a winter, I do this all the time. I own 4-wheel drive vehicles. And so oftentimes like in the winter, I'll see people get stuck. So I'm driving down the road and I'll help. I'll just, hey, you need help out of this ditch or something, and pull people out. Yeah. And I was driving down the highway one day and there was this car that was like stuck in that little section of highway between the lane and the exit ramp, And I think they were on the highway and last minute decided they wanted to get off the exit ramp and hit like a snowdrift and got stuck. So I pull over and I walk up to the car and it's this guy and his wife, and then they have a baby in the car, and he cracks his window. I said, "Are you guys stuck? Or are you just figuring out where you're going?" He's like, "No, I can't get off the snowdrift." And I'm like, "Well," I said, "Here, I'll pull you out. I'll hook winch you out to the front bumper here." And he's like, "Oh my gosh, it's like Rich Franklin?" And I said, "Yeah." And he's like, "Dude, I'm a huge fan." And so he starts to sidetrack, and I was like, "Hey man, I appreciate the fandom, but like you got a baby in the back seat, you're trying to get somewhere." You remind me, yeah. So it's cool when you have those kind of experiences where you're just kind of genuinely doing something as a good deed, and then somebody in the middle of it recognizes you. Like, wait, it'd be interesting if I'm sitting there like, wait, aren't you Garth Brooks?
I have a friend who had Chuck Connors, the rifleman, stop to help him change a tire.
Oh, really?
Years ago, yeah.
I just did that a couple weeks ago. There was a state trooper that was stuck on the highway, and I had pulled over, and he was like, "Man, thanks for pulling over." And midway through, he recognized me. It was pretty funny. You guys played Baton Rouge. You're actually originally from Shreveport, which isn't far from there, right?
Yeah, it's I'm at the top of the state, and I lived in Shreveport until I was 1, and my mom and dad brought me to Nashville with them, and when I was a year old, and my dad was just coming to Nashville because at the request of another person from Shreveport named Shelby Singleton, who became a producer and record label guy. Come to Nashville if you want to try to see what you can do in the music industry. And so that was a very fortuitous thing that my dad followed that advice and came up here. Almost gave up after a month. Yeah. Like, I mean, it blows my mind now that he was willing to give it only a month, to see if he could want to stay in Nashville. And then there were some things that happened right at the last minute after he and my mom had decided to move back to Shreveport that would keep him here in Nashville. And then the rest is history at that point.
Talk about that, because I actually heard you telling this story about your parents moving to Nashville, and they were kind of like, we're not getting it done here. Because I had the same moment in my career where I had quit my job as a teacher and decided that I wanted to pursue athletics as a career. And it was more than a month, but there was just this point in time where I'm like, maybe this just isn't going to work, right? Like maybe this is not what I was meant to do or whatever. And so I just had this moment of like, maybe I should. And then you just kind of like, I'll just stick it out for one more day kind of mentality. And the next day, I'll just stick it out for one more day. And then eventually things turned around.
The way it happened for my dad was after a month. I think the thing that was overwhelming to my dad and my mom was the homesickness. They were really homesick, and session work wasn't picking up for him as a guitar player as fast as he would like. But it was interesting, and the same guy that talked them into moving to Nashville in the first place had gone up to Chicago to visit the home office of Mercury Records, and came back from that trip, came to see my dad and said, Mercury Records is going to open a Nashville office and they want me to run it. And he said to my dad, I want you to be my number 2 guy. So I'll pay you $100 a week, which ended up being 70. And my dad and mom had been renting this house for, I think it was $75 a month. Mm. So they were able to stay in Nashville at that point. There was one other thing that not a lot of people would know about that caused things to sort of get busy for my dad with the phone ringing for session work. And that's when the great guitar player, Hank Garland, who such a phenomenal musician and played on so many hit records in Nashville, had a car wreck. And that was something that caused my dad's phone to start ringing more for session work. And so little by little, he was easing into a groove here in Nashville. And then it wouldn't be, a few years later, maybe, that he became the head of Mercury Records in Nashville, and he would run that label for 21 years.
Your father?
All while still, Jerry Kennedy, who's in the Musicians Hall of Fame. Here in Nashville with the A-team players, Nashville A-team players. And so he was playing on hit records, producing hit records, and, signing new artists. I mean, he signed Roger Miller to Mercury and produced all of his hits, King of the Road, Dang Me Chug Lug, England Swings, all the string of hits from him. He signed the Statler Brothers, produced them, I think, for 31 years. All their wonderful catalog of music. Those guys were phenomenal as well. And then he would sign Reba McEntire, her first record deal, Tom T. Hall, Johnny Rodriguez, and he would play on records by people and records that everybody knows, like Pretty Woman by Roy Orbison, Elvis Presley, Good Luck Charm, Bob Dylan's double album, Blonde on Blonde, Ringo Starr's second solo album, Tammy Wynette, all of her hits and duets with George as well, like Stand By Your Man, one of her big records. He's the electric guitar on that. Harper Valley PTA, he's the dobro, doing all the fretted dobro licks in that hit by Jeannie C. Riley. And so he became, established firmly, dug in Nashville at some point. And I believe in my heart belongs in the Country Music Hall of Fame as well as the Musicians Hall of Fame. And hope that happens at some point for him.
It's crazy to say. So you're basically saying that this car wreck was kind of the linchpin of that pivotal point.
Yeah, it's part of it. For me, it's a God works in mysterious ways kind of thing,
Amen.
And you don't wish anything bad to happen to somebody else. It could be something bad that happens to you that changes your life in a better way too. I've seen crazy things like that happen, where you think, oh, this is the worst thing that could happen to me. That ends up being the best thing that could have happened to me at some point. So those things kind of happen, and you don't want anything bad to happen, but wish anything like that. But it did play a role in him becoming, more called upon to play sessions here in town early on.
I get asked questions about success all the time, and I think to myself, like, I know I read that you were quite the athlete in high school, actually, and I was the exact opposite. And so the fact that I was basically like a third string high school football player that ends up winning a world title, I tell people, man, the stars have to align. Like, God, like, cleared a path for me. And there are things that happen, like you're talking about this car wreck and that being, a linchpin into your father's career. There are things that happen that are even beyond your control that can, be a determining factor to your success, projecting one direction or another oftentimes. Right. And it's just like, there are things beyond your control that you can't just, even with all the raw talent in the world, it does not necessarily guarantee you success.
If I look back at the things that have happened to me in my life, most of them I did not plan. So yeah, I've seen that over and over in my life, where I might've been shooting for something else. And sometimes I think it's important that you are aiming for a target, aiming for something. But don't be surprised if on the way to doing what you thought it was you were supposed to be doing, that you get pulled over here. Hey, you're good at this. Come try this. And then you're on to something different you never thought you would be doing. That's one way I think you find out if something in your life is a calling rather than just a goal. You know, I have a goal in life is different than I have a calling on my life. And the calling that's on my life means it's coming from somewhere else, not me. I don't call myself, you know. Somebody else calls me for something. And a lot of times when you're getting called for the same thing over and over and over and over and over again, that's one way to recognize that, hey, perhaps this is a calling. You know, I tell, when I speak to young kids like Belmont University here in Nashville, that, that's how you can determine whether or not this is what you're supposed to be doing. If somebody's calling you for something all the time, hey, pay attention to that, and it may not be what you thought you would be doing.
Can you give an example of maybe a time you were pursuing a goal, but your calling kept getting in the way of your goal and it took you a different direction?
I think one way that would be best for me to explain that would be maybe in the early 90s, me and my friend Wayne Kirkpatrick were trying to get a record deal. Mm-hmm. So we saw ourselves as artists. We were going to have a group. We were going to have a group called the Mute Brutes of Labor, and we were going to get a record deal. Well, we started recording and, writing and recording all these songs for that project. But there was something else that would call us aside from our plan. And one in particular song that we wrote, that we demoed for this group was a song called Change the World. And so, we thought that's the song. That's the song that's going to get us this record deal and solidify our relationship with this label in New York that had been sort of holding that carrot out in front of us for about a year. And they kept telling us to go back to the studio, record some more songs, give us a pop hit. I can get you an alternative hit out of these 4 songs, but we want a pop hit. So we would go back from time to time and record some things, and ultimately recorded as a last ditch effort this song called Change the World. And he heard it and decided, I don't hear the hit, and I'm going to pass on you guys after a year of, stringing us along. And so we all walked away thinking that we failed. And Wayne and I and our other writer, Tommy Sims, we thought we had something. No, the answer was no. And then Wynonna Judd gets the song on hold, as they say here in Nashville, with the intent to record that song. And we're told that she's going to record it and it'll be a single for her, which is a great news for the songwriters, right?
Yeah.
Because you multiply your income by having radio airplay in addition to record sales, back when people were buying records, mind you. So we waited for 2.5 years for that album to come out. 2.5 years. She finally puts the album out, and she puts her first single out, and it's not our song. We had told it was going to be the first single. No, it was something else. And then we thought, well, maybe it'll be the second single. So a few months. They put out the second. No. Then the third surely must be ours. No. So we walked away a second time thinking that we failed with this one song, that we had started because we wanted to try to get a record deal and be the artist. Well, the summer that we realized that Wynonna was not going to single our song, and I met her producer on Music Row one day, and he said to me, I don't know what to tell you, but her label is saying they're not going to release the song as a single. He said, I think they're crazy, but so, disappointment, but you always just kind of keep on going to the next, just keep working. And it was maybe, I don't know how much longer that year in the summer, I was doing a session with Tommy Sims, one of the writers on Change the World. And he looks at me and says, we're getting another cut on Change the World. Now, when I had turned that song in 4 years prior, almost, 4 years prior, on a new publishing deal I signed with Doug Howard and Polygram Music, first song I turned in was Change the World. I said, can you get this to Eric Clapton? They said they would try, but it didn't happen that way. So now here we are. That was 92, February of 92. Now it's the summer of 96. Clapton's cutting the song. It's going to be the soundtrack single from the movie Phenomenon. Then it gets nominated for 3 Grammys that November. Best Pop Male Vocal Performance for Eric Clapton, which he won. Record of the Year, one of the big four awards, which he and Babyface won. And then one of the other big four is Song of the Year. And we won the Grammy for Song of the Year for that tune. We thought that was the song that was going to make us artists. But this thing was sidetracked out of our, vision and tunnel vision at that point with that regarding that song. Well, once that happened with Clapton and the Grammys, all of a sudden people like Bonnie Raitt were calling us, asking us if we would write her a song. You go for years thinking, how can I get a song to an artist that great? And then she calls us. So we would see that happen to us for the years ensuing. So yeah, something that we had no idea would happen was all of a sudden a life-changing thing for us. And it definitely rerouted us and set us on a different course. And I still have to think that it still affects my life to this day. I mean, maybe a couple of years after the Change the World thing happened, somebody said, we need to get you and Peter Frampton together. And I'm sure they went to him, told him my whole life story, explained the Change the World thing and all that. Would you write with him? And he mulled it over and said, okay. Of course, they come to me and say, would you like to write with Peter Frampton? Yes. I don't have to think about it. So it just changed my life at that point. And I've been working with him for 22 years now, going on 23 years or something. And just, I love that guy, and the work that we've done together that he's allowed me to be a part of with him has just been an amazing thing. It's kind of surreal. A lot of surreal things happened just from that one song, but that wasn't what we were planning.
When you're pursuing a goal that maybe you've set in life, and you have this story with Change the World, how do you decipher between, say, for example, noise that is perhaps pulling you away from your goal, or things that, like a calling, as you say, that is pulling you in a different direction that is going to lead to greater things in your life? Because there's got to be sometimes this crossroad where you're like, I don't know, this other thing keeps popping up. Is this my calling, or is this just something trying to derail me?
That's a great question. And I think how I would answer that would be, the noise for me, which would have been early on, years ago, would be when something that you think is going to happen doesn't. When the answer is no, you pitch a song to somebody that you're so sure they're going to record this song. It's so them. It was meant for them. This is meant to be. I prayed about it. I mean, all these things you can pile into the reasons why this is definitely going to happen, and then it doesn't happen. The answer is no. That can be the noise that causes you to step away and think, well, I need to change jobs, or that didn't happen, so I'm not any good, or, there are a number of things that you could let that derail. So I think that you have to know within yourself, and I learned through the years of hearing no, that, a successful songwriter probably hears no 9 out of 10 times. That's a successful songwriter. Yeah.
It's the same for actors doing auditions.
Yeah. Or the batter at the box, they're successful if they get 3 out of 10, right? Mm-hmm. So a songwriter is less than that, but you have to know, or you have to believe, or be patient, or trust. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into this, that you're to continue to do this,
I think for me personally, after like 4 years, I probably would have been like, maybe I just was wrong about this song, Change the World, that I wrote.
Getting all excited. I mean, can you imagine this actually happened? There was one day when we were told that Winona, before she had recorded the song, it was going to be a duet with her and Paul McCartney.
Oh, wow.
I think I went out in my front yard and walked in circles for a while, just kind of looking at the sky. But, and then when, that didn't happen, it's, again, part of that, the answer is no. What you thought was going to happen didn't happen. That happened so many times with just that one song. And I learned a lot of life lessons from just that one song and its story.
When Eric Clapton finally recorded this song, and you got word, I'm assuming you got word that the song was up for a Grammy. Did you guys think, as writers, that you had a good chance of winning a Grammy for that song?
No. We, in fact, thought that Diane Warren probably would win the Song of the Year with her Because You Love Me, Celine Dion. And this was the 39th annual Grammy Awards. In the previous 38 awards ceremonies, the Song of the Year came from Nashville once. So I'm already thinking
Statistically not in your favor.
Statistically, or maybe there's a bias or whatever. Hey, it's only country music out of Nashville. Keep to yourselves and whatever. But it wound up that, none of us were prepared for having to get up and go up on stage and receive that. None of us, because we didn't think that was going to happen.
You accept your Grammy, you get up on stage, and you have zero planned speech. So, and now you're suddenly accepted a Grammy. What do you say?
I had nothing prepared for that night, right? So when I walk, and it felt like I was walking on the moon, slow motion, feet are heavy, I'm walking past Bonnie Raitt, of all people, sitting right there, Vince Gill, and then we would eventually go up onto the podium in front of, and Eric Clapton and Babyface are sitting front row, right in front of the mic, And so Wayne and me and Tommy are on stage. Wayne is kind of a shy, dear friend of mine, but he's a shy guy. He sticks his elbow in my ribs and says, "Are you going to talk? Like, you go first." And so I said, I had nothing prepared, but I walked up to the mic, and this was at Madison Square Garden. It was the last time they had the Grammys in New York City. And I walked up to the mic, and the first thing that spilled out of my mouth was, "My Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. He is strong, weak in no way." And then I made my little thank yous, to my publisher and to Eric and Babyface. I acknowledged my wife. I told them to put the cameras on her, which they did, which was very smart. Get it off me, put it on her. She's beautiful, And so, and then afterwards, when I went back to the hotel, after we did two after parties, met Clapton, which he doesn't do parties, I'm told, but he came and found us.
Oh, so wait, hold on. You wrote this song for Clapton and had never met him.
Oh, no. Yeah, no.
Even after he performed and recorded it, like, you didn't meet him until after
the Grammy Awards.
He'd already accepted his Grammy before you guys accepted your Grammy, correct?
He won the first one they gave away at that evening. Joe opened with him and Babyface playing that song. That's how the Grammy Awards started that year.
Yeah, okay.
And so they play the song, and then somebody comes up to present the first award of the night, Best Pop Male Vocal Performance, and he was nominated and he won. So he gets up on stage and thanks one of the three writers, because there was one of three of us that had an LA-based publisher. So they knew that publisher and writer, and Clapton, this is a song for a soundtrack album. So he comes in and does his work and leaves, and he's gone, So he doesn't think anything more about it. Well, then we win in the middle of the show for Song of the Year. Well, then he wins at the end of the show for Record of the Year. And now he's like, and the writers, puts the S on the end of the word, because he was surprised. He was kind of caught.
Oh, he didn't know there were three writers to the song.
No, he didn't know who had written the song. So then he acknowledges, and the writers, for the first time. And then we all leave after the Grammys are over, and we go to an after party, and it's the record label that that song came out on, Warner Reprise. And we're walking around just fixing little plates of finger food or whatever. And I remember Wayne saying to me, "It's a shame we are not going to get to meet him." And I said, "Yeah, he doesn't come to stuff like this, I'm sure." And I put a bite of food in my mouth and turned around, and these two hands hit my shoulders, and it was him right there in front of me. And first thing he said was, "I am so sorry." He said, I didn't know there were three writers on the song. He was embarrassed, Might have been the reason why he came to find us, actually, come to think of it, because he really doesn't go to parties, I'm told. And, we talked for about 10 minutes. And at some point he said something about, "Well, I heard Tommy's voice on the demo and just thought that he was the only writer." And then Tommy said, "Oh, no, that was GK singing the demo." "Oh," he said, "I'm so sorry." So anyway, then we made a picture with him and he left. And I thought I would never see him again. But I called him on the phone 6 years, or they called me on the phone 6 years later. They were in the studio recording another one of my songs. And I went from the producer to Andy Fairweather Lowe, telling him the fingering that I used on the demo, because they wanted to employ that in the demo or the record they were cutting. And then at the last second, he says, "Well, listen, Eric wants to say hi to you." And I'm kind of like, "Oh, humming, you know." And he gets on the phone. "Hello, Gordon." He says, "I said, before you say anything else, thank you for what you did for us 6 years ago." And he goes, "Oh, it's very sweet, very kind. Listen, are you using a pick or your fingers?" It just went right on by the small talk, chit chat, thank you stuff to, "Hey, let's guitar speak." And so we talked about the guitar thing for just a few seconds. And he said, "Well, I don't know if we'll get it as cool as your demo, but we're going to give it a go." And I said, "Oh, I think you will." And he said, "God bless." Hung up. That's the last time I talked to him.
You know, winning a Grammy is pretty cool, but I got to be honest with you, Eric Clapton is kind of revered as one of the greatest guitar players ever.
Yes.
And so for him to call you and say, "Hey, what's going on with the fingering? Like, what kind of fingering?"
Yeah.
For me, if I was in your shoes, that would be a cooler accomplishment than winning a Grammy, honestly.
Well, you would go, yeah, because it crossed my mind. How do I frame that moment? How do I capture that moment? It's just in my memory. I mean, that's the only place it can be, because nobody else heard that. It's not written down. You know, he didn't email it to me, which would be a different thing. I could say, "Look," you know, but those are just those things that are precious to me that, you know, and I can tell you about it, but it's a great memory.
It reminds me of the time that Michael Jordan called me for advice on his jump shots, right? You know, it's just something I do on the side. So
It'd be the same, yeah.
You know, growing up in high school, I mentioned this earlier. You were quite the athlete in high school. What because I can remember this distinct moment, say like in my junior high years, when I was thinking about picking up an instrument at that time, and I realized that I had to give up gym class. I had to make this choice between like music or gym. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Like, what? I'm not playing dodgeball? Forget that. And so for me, I'll just say, like, in my life, like music and athletics were kind of like disjoint. You know, growing up, like you're kind of in the education system forced into that somewhat. You have to choose one or the other. Like being such an accomplished athlete for the high school that you went to, how is it that you ended up in music? I mean, I know obviously your family's in music, but was there any part of you that thought like, I wouldn't mind pursuing a lifetime of athletics instead?
There was one very, very small college that offered me a chance to go play basketball, which, you know, it was down in Memphis and wouldn't have been too far from home. But no, I was at that point, I'm going to go to Belmont and pursue music. One key thing at the high school I went to, which was a very small high school, 7th through 12th grade, there were 250 students or something like that.
A real big graduating class there.
Well, there were 60 people in my graduating class.
Tiny.
And so, but there was a guy who was a junior when I was a senior, just a year behind me, a guy named Dan Huff. And if you look up his credits, it would blow your mind as a guitar player and producer. He probably produces, so many of the great acts that have, you know, been recording music in Nashville in the last 25 years or something. You know, Rascal Flatts, Shadazy, Keith Urban, Faith Hill, and on and on and on. But I mean, he's played on records by, you know, Bob Seger and Michael Jackson, and oh gosh, I think he's even on White Snake. They snuck him in to do some stuff. He's just a world-class musician, producer, and person, you know. But I went to high school with Dan, and while I'm sitting there enjoying football, basketball, track for 6 straight years, I'm playing 3 sports, doing three sports year round. There's this guy over there that reminds me that this is a huge part of my life. You know, my dad, on the one hand, he probably enjoyed me playing sports more than he enjoyed me playing guitar, you know, for an assembly at school or whatever. He might say different now, but I think back then he was more intrigued watching us, his 3 boys, in sports, you know. Because, I mean, when it came to the music thing, been there, done that, you know, and what hadn't he done? So there was this guy, Dan Huff, that was sort of like a little bit of a North Star for me for being a guitar player, as much as my dad was this successful guitar player and I had access to the instruments at home. Thank God I had, you know, a dad that would, you know, give me his 1961 Gibson ES 335 guitar that he played on Pretty Woman, for goodness sakes. As you know, when everybody else my age was asking their dads for the keys to the car, I was asking, can I play that guitar? Yeah. Yeah, take it, play it. But then it was, like I said, a key thing for me though was Dan being there at school with me. And he pushed me to really get serious about guitar at that time. And then I would also end up taking his place. He asked me if I would substitute for him in this Christian rock band called Whiteheart. 1984, would I substitute for him for 3 shows while he went to do some sessions in Los Angeles? I said, okay. So I stepped in, learned the songs, did those 3 shows. Well, I quit the band 6 years later because he never came back. He never came back from LA for 5 years. 5 of those 6 years, he stayed out there and conquered the world. And then he came back here and began to do the same here in Nashville. And we've been friends all through these years. But I mean, he was a key figure for me to sort of, at the point where I'm doing sports, very serious about it and all that. But no, this is my true thing here,
So you didn't grow up with a father that was like shoving a guitar in your hand before you could walk.
Oh, no. And mom was a singer back when she was in her teens. She was an artist on Ram Records out of Shreveport, and then Epic Records after that. But when she had the 3 boys, she thought maybe she'd step back into singing. She did one road trip up to Ohio, as a matter of fact. She met an artist while she was up there that came up to my mom, and my mom was using her maiden name, Linda Brannon, at the time, and said, "Oh, I just love the sound of your name, Linda Brannon. That's just beautiful." She quit music after that trip because once she got to Ohio, she realized that she can't leave her 3 boys at home. She missed us and thought doesn't feel right. So she decided she wasn't going to do that anymore. But one interesting bit of trivia, she told me years later when I was growing up that she met an artist that said that about her name. And she said, the next time I saw that artist, she had changed her name because she liked Linda Brannon so much. She changed her name to Jackie DeShannon.
Oh.
And so, yeah. So I thought that was an interesting little nugget of trivia from my mom that she remembered about that trip to Ohio. But but no, neither parent pushed me into music. I think now if you talk to my dad, he would be glowing over what not just myself, but my 2 brothers have done in music. All of us are in music. So he loves that.
So growing up though, I mean, because you talk about Dan, did you actually use your father as a resource for learning? Because I'm thinking about this in my life. For example, like if I had a son and I have a black belt in jiu-jitsu and my son's like, I'm gonna go learn jiu-jitsu somewhere else. I'm like, what? Like you got a great resource right here at home, pal.
Well, I do remember, again, my parents, my mom and my grandmother. We had moved away from Goodlettsville, Tennessee, the middle of my 3rd grade year, and moved to Nashville, changed schools. At the end of that school year in the summer, Mom took us back to our old neighborhood so we could just have a day to play with the guys on the dead end street where I grew up. And by the time we went back there, just in a half a year that I hadn't seen them, my friend across the street, a guy named Scott Culberson, his father was an Eastern Airlines pilot. But when we went to go visit them that summer, Scott at that point was taking guitar lessons. His dad was, getting him guitar lessons. And I remember just being really bent out of shape. Wait just a doggone second here. I'm supposed to be the guitar player. My dad's a guitar player. And I kind of came home a little bit depressed and pouting or whatever. And my grandmother and my mom are in the kitchen. What's wrong? Scott's daddy's getting him guitar lessons. Well, your dad is a guitar player. Get him to teach you. And I said, he won't teach me. They asked why. And I said, because he wants to be the best dang guitar picker in the world. That's the mind of a 3rd grader, right? So somehow I got it in my head that my dad would not want to teach me guitar. And then I think there was also a time where I embarrassed myself asking him a question when I got brave enough to ask him a question. Hey, Dad, listen to this record. Linda Ronstadt, When Will I Be Loved? How is the guitar player playing that solo? I don't get what he's doing. He said, oh, he's using 2 tracks. He played a part on the first track, and then on the second, played a harmony to it. I'm like, oh, I walked away, like Chris Farley, idiot, So I probably got scared and embarrassed to ask my dad questions after that. But I will say the greatest thing about growing up in my father's house was not only the access to the instruments ultimately, but arguably my first record player was a Seaberg 100 jukebox that was in the basement. And he taught me as a 5-6-year-old kid how to find that toggle switch and turn it on. The lights would come on, and I could play all these 45 records that he had loaded in there. And there were instrumental records by him, Roger Miller records. There was.
By the way, I'll bet half my listeners don't even know what a 45 record is. Just FYI.
Yeah, it's a vinyl record. It's 7.
Yeah, but they wouldn't know the difference between like when you say a 45, like what the difference is.
Right. They probably think I'm talking about a gun or something, but no. The same would be true for cassette tapes. I realize when I go talk to Belmont students, I have to pause and go, do you know what that is? But then there was something about the sound of that jukebox, even to me as a 6-year-old kid, the sound of it just mesmerized me. And I would sit on the floor and close my eyes and just listen to record after record after record. On the wall to the right, there was an upright piano. The first song I ever learned how to play as a 7-year-old kid was on piano. Instead of guitar, it was on piano, and it was Stand By Me by Ben E. King. And then also, once we moved to Nashville, and Dad is running Mercury Records Nashville office at this point, about 2, 3, 4 times a year, we would get the new releases from Mercury. All of the labels attached to Mercury Records, the albums, the vinyl albums would come in a huge box to our house. And me and my brothers would go through there and divide all that stuff up and take these records, So I'm getting Bachman Turner Overdrive and Rush and Rod Stewart. Every Picture Tells a Story, which is a staple for me these days, all these years later. And, then at some point, I would make a list of records I wanted for Christmas or whatever. And, I've got all the Beatles albums. My dad brought home the first Beatles album, probably when I was about 7 or 8 years old. Well, maybe not even that old. No, I was younger than that, but we had a little turntable in our bedroom. So just the fact that he would we were inundated with these vinyl records. I was building a library in my head of references that I would still be using all these years later when I'm making music myself. That was just a blessing, I would call it, of growing up in that house that I grew up in. It became such a part of me. But they never pushed us.
When you were growing up, like learning how to play the guitar, at what point did you decide that writing was going to be a key part of like writing songs rather than just playing guitar?
I wanted to be a guitar player first and foremost. And then maybe when I was a senior in high school, I thought, I wonder if I could write a song. And I did write a song when I was a senior in high school. I remember being in the auditorium at the school by myself when I wrote it. And I also have forgotten it. I never recorded it or did anything with it. I couldn't name it now. Probably just as well for you and your listening audience that I can't remember anything about that song, because it was going to take me a while to learn how to write a decent song. But yeah, I was a senior in high school.
When you say a while, how long is a while?
Oh, I would say even at the point where in 1984, so I graduated high school in 78, and in 84, I get my first publishing deal because I'm in this group Whiteheart, and I'm going to be bringing songs that I write with this group into the deal with Welk Music, which became Polygram Music. So, but even when I signed my first publishing deal, I could write songs for the group I was in, but when I would try to write anything outside of that, it was basically centered on, hey, I've got this cool guitar part I want to play, so I'll sling a song around this, and here you go, and then you go, this is not a good song. And so it probably took me, I bet you I wrote 40 or 50 or 60 of those kinds of songs before I, got an idea of what I really should be doing when I'm writing songs. And I would say at the point where I met and started working with Wayne Kirkpatrick, in about 1991. And he's a guy that's written songs for Amy Grant, Michael W. Smith, and all the years later, he's written, a lot of stuff for Little Big Town that he produced their first few albums. And now he's writing for Broadway shows, Something Rotten on Broadway. And now it's Mrs. Doubtfire, the Broadway show. But I would say when he hired me to play guitar on records he was producing. And then at some point, we both, being from Louisiana, born, or I was born there, he grew up in Baton Rouge. Let's try to write a song. Well, my relationship with him, songwriting, is where everything I realized I know what to do now. And it was literally like reaching over and just flicking a switch, working with Wayne. And he would say the same thing, that it was an iron sharpening iron experience. And we continue to write to this day. But that was something that sort of, for the first time in my life, I got it. So that's 1991. So that's a lot of years. And I wrote some good songs before that. I'm not saying I didn't, but I wrote some bad songs before that. Now, I don't, in my mind, if I'm my own audience, I don't write bad songs anymore. I just don't.
What year was it that you wrote Change the World?
April of 92, and then 96 is when the record came out. So April of 92. But we started the song in April of 91. And unlike all the other songs we wrote together as a trio, this one was like a baton being passed. One guy started it. Months later, another guy picked it up. Months later, a guy finishes it. A year between when it was started and when the demo was done, a year. And none of us in the room together when that song was, what we each wrote, was written.
I'm trying to define that moment of switch. Like when you said, like, I just suddenly got it. Like, what was the difference between, say, the song you wrote right before you wrote Change the World and then Change the World? How do you go from not winning a Grammy to winning a Grammy?
I would say there was a good many songs that were really good songs out of just that project that Wayne and I were working on, The Mute Brutes of Labor. There were some really great songs. And the reason I think, and I can tell you that, is because although Change the World is the first one to pop out of that bunch of songs we did with that little group we were working on in the studio, 3 of the first 4 songs we recorded as a group were on the Chris Gaines, Garth Brooks record, like 7 years later. When his record came out, there's a song on there called Digging for Gold, White Flag, and My Love Tells Me So were the 3 of the first 4 songs we recorded for that project. Change the World was like the 10th song we recorded.
Oh, okay.
Out of that project. So we are moving along, writing songs for contemporary Christian music acts. I'd had a song recorded by a country artist named Mel McDaniel. The Blues Brothers band, Dan Aykroyd, recorded one of my songs while I was writing for Welk and Polygram those years. But once the Change the World thing happened, everybody wanted to go back and listen to everything we ever did.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of Nashville artists that started listening to our catalog at that point and realizing that there are some good songs in there. And like I said, 3 of the first 4 we did wound up on that Chris Gaines project.
Because circling back to Garth, you've written over a dozen songs for him now, correct?
Oh yeah, I think it's like around 15.
Yeah.
I think one of them is a duet with his wife, Trisha. And then the last one I did was I wrote with him, and he finally put his name on a song we wrote together, because there's been a couple of others where he gave his songwriting credit to somebody else.
Oh.
Like you give somebody a birthday present, here, you put your name on this song. But yeah, the last one we did was a song called Pure Adrenaline, which wound up being used, we had to do versions of, for the CBS SEC Game of the Week. I think it was back in 17, maybe, that we did this. Anyway, every week for like 14 straight weeks, a video with us performing a version of that Pure Adrenaline song for that particular game of the week.
So when you're on stage playing with Garth, like, is there a difference for you between playing a Garth song you didn't write and then one that you did?
First of all, we don't do any of the songs I wrote in the show.
Why
in
not?
the show. Well, first of all, 10 of them are on the Chris Gaines record, and that's still kind of taboo for him to mention. But what he does do during the show is at the end of, like for the encore, he will come out on stage by himself with an acoustic guitar and do what's he calls housekeeping. Now, the whole time we've been playing up to that point at these shows, people are out in the audience holding signs. A good many of them are song titles. And it's like, that's the request. And he will kind of go through and play a little bit of this, a little bit of that, verse and the chorus of that. And every night that I'm on stage, I see "You Move Me." Somebody's holding a sign down near the front that says "You Move Me." Well, that's the first song of mine and a guy named Pierce Pettis we wrote together that Garth did on the Sevens album. And sometimes he will do a verse and a chorus of that song, but I'm not getting to do it with him. Then there's one song on the Chris Gaines record called "It Don't Matter to the Sun," which he's asked me to come up on stage 3 times now to play just for him to do in the stadium at sound check. I keep thinking, is he doing this leading up to something? But they filmed it while the first time we did it was in Detroit in the Ford Field, dome. And I saw the video later and I didn't realize they were filming the entire thing. It looks like a movie, but I've got a video of him, just me and him. I'm playing, he's singing "It Don't Matter to the Sun." So I don't know if we'll ever do that during the show together, but he's done a little bit of that. Both of those songs this year, and I've been down off stage just listening from down below.
All right. Last question I want to ask you, Gordon. Just like hearing your life story and how things developed and what you came to Nashville, like your family, what they came to Nashville for and what you set out to do. Is there any goals? I'll use the word goals, calling, whatever, left that you haven't accomplished yet that you're like, I still want to do this thing in music?
Oh, well, I met Paul McCartney several years ago now or whatever, which was, somebody asked my publisher friend, Doug Howard, what was that like? And he said it was like meeting royalty, and I can see that and feel that. And they asked me, what was it like for you? I said, for me, it was like meeting music, because there's some of that guy's DNA and everything I think I've ever attempted to do as a writer, as a player. And so I would think to get to do something with him, it wouldn't matter what it would be. So there's still things like that, that I would, if I could do, choose something to do. But I mean, I grew up in a house with a dad who had worked with Elvis, Orbison, Jerry Lee Lewis, Charlie Rich, Johnny Cash, Tammy Wynette, George Jones, and I could just sit here and keep rattling names until your next show starts. But that was one of the things that was intimidating for me when I was growing up. Do I really want to try to follow in my dad's footsteps, because look at that
resume.
Yeah. And here I am, 62, and I'm looking over my shoulder and I see Garth, Peter Frampton, Eric Clapton, Bonnie Raitt, Ricky Skaggs, and I've got my own list of the greats of the greats, that I've been very privileged to work with. So if there's somebody, if there's somebody else that I would, dream of a chance to get to work with, it would probably be Paul McCartney. And I'm sure there are a lot of others that may sneak up on me and I'll say and be pinching myself, I can't believe I'm getting to work with this person. There's a lot of them, a lot of them. I would love to see Eric Clapton again. I would love to actually sit down and just have dinner with the guy.
Yeah.
Because there are people that have recorded my songs. George Strait has recorded one of mine and Wayne's songs, and I've never met the guy. So there are a lot of those kinds of things that I would love to just be able to, say hi to people and thank them in person or whatever. But, I'm good though. I get to walk out on stage with Garth Brooks, right? This coming weekend in Salt Lake City, 2 nights, 55,000 people per night. He played there last year for 55,000 people.
It's just amazing that you can fill you guys can fill a 55,000 seat arena 2 days in a row. 2 days in a row. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And we go do 2 in Edmonton. Then we'll go do 2 in Charlotte. And then I think it's singles after that before going to Ireland.
Have you ever played overseas?
I've been to Ireland, and yeah, I've played concerts in Germany with Whiteheart. I've played with Frampton. I did a little radio tour of Germany, Holland. Did a TV show in Amsterdam. But yeah, I mean, I've done a little bit of stuff overseas, and then played it. I did a songwriter thing in Ireland, like one of those retreats at a castle, and then we went from the west coast of Ireland to the east coast, or over to Dublin, and did a show at Temple Music Bar, and did a live thing there with. It was all the songwriters, got up and performed. I actually got up and did Change the World with a bunch of, like, a house band that we had put together from the songwriters that were at this retreat. So, I mean, I've had a little bit of experience doing things overseas, but not much. Much.
I'm sure this is going to be quite the experience.
This will be on a different scale. Yeah.
5-day concert is insane. So
yeah,
enjoy that experience, man. Well, listen, I appreciate you coming on, my friend. Thank you so much, and I really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, and when you come to Nashville, give me a shout.
Will do, for sure, man.
All right.
Awesome.
Thank you.
You take care.
Quite Franklin is providing this podcast as a public service, but it is neither a legal interpretation nor legal advice, nor a statement of Quite Franklin policy. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation of that product or entity by Rich Franklin or Quite Franklin. The views expressed by guests on the podcast are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Views and opinions expressed by Quite Franklin employees or representatives are the views and opinions of the persons expressing them, and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of Quite Franklin or any of its officials or principals. Nothing heard on this podcast at any time is medical advice or is intended as medical advice. The listener must always consult his or her personal physician or other qualified medical professional regarding any questions of a medical nature. If you have any questions about this disclaimer, please contact our general counsel